the summer series of Nightline, Friday nights, of course. A regular guest and always welcome is Nigel of Nigel's Animal Rescue.
I love the way you shake his hand when he comes into the studio and turns the mic on. I'll do it as well. How are you, Nigel?
I'm well.
Good to see you. We've actually spoken to him when he first arrived. No need to shake his hand live on air.
Oh, well, that's the sort of guy I am, you know. I'm super friendly.
Thanks a lot, Phil, and it's great to see you back there. And if you've grown a couple of inches, you're a bit higher than normal.
Yeah, this is a high chair that I've hired. I'm not allowed.
With a bib.
Obviously, it's been high, but I can't sit any lower than this in case my new hip pops out.
Yes, for
which
sure.
would be agony.
Yeah.
But you had a nasty experience. You fell 60 feet from a tree, didn't you?
I did. Back in 1988, the anniversary was actually just earlier on last week on the 18th. I did have an unfortunate fall from 60 foot out of a tree, landed on the ground. I was tree lopping at the time. I wasn't actually rescuing an animal.
Did you have a harness on? Obviously not.
Yeah, no, I did have a harness on, but I only had one strap, and I'd actually decided I'd been up the tree for about 4 or 5 hours, and it was a very, very large pine tree to start off with, but I decided I'm going to come down to the ground. I was preparing my ropes, and it would take me a little bit to explain exactly what happened, but I misjudged, and yes, I went crashing to the ground.
Was there someone there to rescue?
Oh, well, I did have another fella there with me at the time, and I was knocked unconscious just like yourself with your fall.
Yeah.
And woke up in an ambulance, basically, and off to Monash Medical Centre.
And how long did your recuperation take?
Well, originally they told me 32 weeks that I'd be there, and not knowing whether or not I'm going to be able to walk again because I'd fractured my spine in two places.
Is this Bruce and I've talked to you within the last 20 years?
Yeah, back in 1988 this happened.
Okay, just before you went on there.
Yeah,
together.
just before. So it was 4 weeks to the day that I was actually released from hospital. I was one of their miracle patients.
Must have been.
I never suffered any numbness or tingling feelings down my legs or down my arms. I had complete bed rest. I was never operated on, but I did fracture my spine in 2 places. Yeah. And I just say somebody upstairs was looking out for me that day.
No doubt about that. Now, do
you two must realise just exactly how lucky the two of you are.
To be alive.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Otherwise, you'd be working on your own tonight and talking to yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, when I first heard about Phil, I was just absolutely devastated, thinking, he's not even going to make it back to Melbourne again.
Could we worse?
We're very, very lucky to have you here, Phil.
Thank you, Nigel. Now, did that experience of yours give you a fear of heights or make you a bit wary?
No, well, yes, it made me wary because I always have 2 straps on the tree now at all times.
Okay, like a harness?
Yeah, a harness, but the straps go around the trunk of the tree, so when I take one off to go a little bit higher up the tree, I've got the second one on all the time, and there is the only way that I can fall out of a tree is if the tree falls over.
Yeah, so you're like a mountain climber with backup gear.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I haven't had that experience since, but if there was one day in my life that I could change, it would be that day, because I do feel and suffer from that until this day.
Oh, yeah, well, if there's one day I could change, it's the day I met Bruce. Okay, so now let's be serious. Let's talk New South Wales for sure. And we forget about the huge loss of life of wildlife.
All we hear is we've lost so many houses. We're lucky people aren't dying. There has been a death, but we hear all about the people side of bushfires. But those bushfires are ravaging through places which are homes to millions of animals.
Absolutely. I've been talking with I4 this afternoon. Excuse me. I4 is the International Fund for Animal Welfare. When we had our Black Saturday back in 2009, they came down and helped us up in the Whittlesea area and did amazing work. They sent this human doctor who's also a veterinarian as well. Ralph Howard is his name. And they supported us, treated all of our animals, and absolutely fantastic. Well, they're up there in the Hunter Valley or the Port Stephens Peninsula at the moment, which have just experienced the worst fires in decades. Now, that whole area up there is very prime habitat for wildlife, to koalas and all sorts of animals. And they've given me a couple of animals that have come out, which they've found 5 koalas. 4 of them have survived. One's had to be euthanized, and the 4 are currently in care. There's several possums that have come out. There's 6 swamp wallabies, and it's just like the fires down here. A lot of animals didn't make it. They didn't get out because the fires are so intense that most of the animals actually die before the fire gets to them.
From smoke inhalation.
Yeah, smoke inhalation and heat radiation. I've got a couple of websites and places if anybody wants to donate any money to help out with the animals that come out and help the teams up there. So get your pens, and towards the end I'll give those websites out to you there.
Yes, you must.
So, but the problem is when once the fire's been through, the animals then come back that do survive. There might be koalas up trees, but all the leaves are all dead on the tree. There's just no food for them. There's no water for them, and this is where all the rescuers all get out there on the ground and start putting out food drops and water stations for the wildlife there. And this goes on for many, many months. In our Black Saturday in 2009, we're still putting out food drops and water 12 months after the fires. So this is a real long-term operation, and this is where these people really need support to be able to go out and do this.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of birds perish as well as animals.
Most of the birds...
you would imagine the birds would fly away.
They do fly away, but they also get caught up in the heat thermals. I've certainly seen a lot of birds on the ground which have been burnt and singed, but not sort of burnt from fire. It's when they're sort of up in the sky. So it's mainly the marsupials and mammals on the ground there, the kangaroos, wallabies, wombats, snakes, all that.
It strikes me, given the size and ferocity of these fires in New South Wales, the numbers you've read out there of how many koalas and things have come out doesn't seem that many. Would that mean that they're just perishing?
Well, yes, absolutely. Most of the animals do suffer and end up dying because of the fires, and but it's the people that are out there searching for what has survived and trying to spot a koala that's 100 foot up a tree. You've really got to have keen eyes, binoculars, and all those sorts of things. But I'm sure that more animals will be coming out as time goes on, because it takes weeks really before you can get into a fire ground. It's got to be totally out first before the wildlife people are allowed
and
in.
Safe, because the hulks of burnt out trees can topple at any time.
Absolutely. And then you've got the hot areas on the ground where it's still burning underground, and you walk on that, you sort of fall down 3-4 feet underground. And that's where a lot of animals that do survive the actual main fire, when they come down to the ground, that's when they all get burnt, because they're walking on top of the hot fire ground, burning all of their paws. And that's where the koalas all cop it really, really badly, as they're trying to find green leaves.
Yeah, it breaks your heart, doesn't it?
It is absolutely terrible.
Because they've got enough to contend with diseases already, haven't they, without bushfires?
They certainly have.
Chlamydia, is that called chlamydia? Or is that
that's another disease that the koalas get.
That's not from fires.
It's not from fires at all.
No, but
that's another whole issue, that one there.
It's to do with the koalas, isn't it?
Well,
yes, it is.
Yes. And it's a disease that's not
we'll
really...
get Colleen Wood from Southern Ash Wildlife Shelter on, and we'll talk about chlamydia one night, and she's the one that had Sam the koala.
Okay, now what about baby magpies falling out of trees?
Everybody, there's baby magpies and baby birds all over Melbourne on the ground at the moment, or I should say Australia almost. A lot of people don't realise that a baby magpie can spend up to a week on the ground before it's up and flying. So if you see a baby magpie on the ground, don't assume that it's out of the nest too early. The parent birds are around feeding it, looking after it, taking care of it. And if you've really got to watch out for the broken legs and the broken wings. If you see a magpie or a bird on the ground with a wing that's dropped down, hanging on the ground, well, that's a very easy indication that that bird's got a broken wing. If it's not up on its legs, running around, well, then you've got a broken leg, because when they do come out of the nest in the high winds, those problems can happen. But as I've talked about before in the past with rescuing a baby magpie on the ground, if you do that, you never ever pick one up in front of its parents. You have to make sure that the parents are in somebody's yard, out of sight first, before you go in with a box straight up to the baby magpie, into the box, and then out of the area as quickly as possible. You never do it in front of the parents, because you'll cause that bird to become a swooping bird. And a lot of people don't realise this. So don't pick up a baby magpie straight away. Sit back from a distance, monitor the bird, watch the parents come down, ground feeding it. If it looks okay, it's up on its legs, running around, because the parents are actually teaching it how to gather food on the ground as well.
Yeah.
As I've been driving around Victoria, I've been watching them all over the place. Now, all the wildlife shelters are absolutely chock-a-block full of baby magpies that didn't need rescuing. They should have been left behind.
And yet, if you leave them on the ground, a cat or a wolf, or a fox could
Fox
get
and
to
cats
them
and dogs
overnight.
can certainly get to them, Phil.
Yeah.
What you should do, if a baby magpie is on the ground, you wait until dark time, night time. Once it's gone dark, the adult birds are up in the trees, they're sound asleep, or they don't have very good vision at night time, and magpies don't fly at night unless you've got a big full moon and it's fairly light. So you can pick up the baby magpie off the ground, pop them up onto a tree limb, off the ground, just to keep them away from the foxes and cats, but only do that well and truly after dark.
We have a rather young kitten who gets a bit enthusiastic and likes to take on anything that comes anywhere near him, including our older cat who just pounds him to death. Our young stupid kitten noticed a young magpie, because we have a family of magpies who live
Yes,
near
I've
us.
seen those there.
Well, they've got a youngster who's learning to fly. Isn't the fastest, smartest thing on the planet. But when our cat was outside wandering around and came upon this baby magpie and went within about 10 feet of it, boy, did it cop a swooping from the parents.
Yes, that's right. That's just them protecting the young. That's a natural instinct to do that. So,
Is it okay to feed them some mincemeat and so on, or should we encourage them?
I always say you should not feed native wildlife, any sort of food.
Including lorikeets, even.
Well, you've obviously got them in cages and things, because a lot of people feed bread to a lot of ducks and wildlife and things, and magpies and all of that, which is really like giving them lollies and sugar, and it's really not good. It's processed food. The wildlife, there is plenty of food out there for them to survive on. But the tradition that everybody has is to feed the local magpies in their backyard and befriend them, which in small doses is okay.
And now,
but I didn't say that.
Nigel of Nigel's Animal Rescue, you've been making news this week about the koala and the steel trap.
Yes. Last week I received a call from Help for Wildlife about a koala that was up a tree with a steel jaw leg hole trap. Now, I've picked up 4 animals in the last 2 years with these traps on, but I've never had to deal with a koala. So I rushed down there, climbed the tree to where the koala was, about 60 foot up the tree. It's a very windy night, and it was half a dead limb that we were on. But the koala wouldn't budge out of the tree for me. He wouldn't come down to the ground because the trap was on his leg, and I somehow managed to get the trap off his leg while I was up the tree, and as soon as I did that, the koala went basically running straight down the tree into the waiting hands of Jenny Bryant from the Koala Hospital in Tyab, who then took her home. We gave her painkillers and antibiotics straight away. People would have seen that on the news, and the next day down to the vets, and it was a vet's decision to have the koala put to sleep. He did lose 2 toes out of it, and I believe that trap was on this poor koala's foot for up to 2 weeks.
Oh, how cruel.
Looking at the amount of decomposition of the tissue and the bones sticking out of the paw there, it was one of the worst sights I've ever seen with our koalas, apart from bushfire burnt koalas. But what a lot of people don't realise, those old rabbit traps that people hang up in their bars and have them in their garages and places are actually illegal to possess. If you've got one in your possession, it can be up to a $24,000 fine, I've been told.
Okay.
They are totally outlawed. People are selling them at markets. You better watch out, because we've got a bit of a campaign happening to make sure that we're trying to get as many of these traps out of society. So if anybody knows of any traps anywhere at all, please either get your angle grinder out, cut them up into little pieces, or hand them into your local police station.
They're barbaric, aren't they?
They're absolutely barbaric. They're horrific injuries. The animals suffer so much pain, and why people are setting them in residential Melbourne and suburbs, I've got no idea, apart from probably they don't like the possum that comes into the yard or the cat that comes into the yard.
Yeah, but that's illegal too.
And it is, and if you're caught with a animal in a trap that has died, that can be aggravated cruelty, and you can be fined up to $24,000 and 10 years imprisonment.
And so you should. Now, before you leave us, Nigel, you had a couple of phone numbers.
Yes, to help out with the animals animals up in New South Wales. The organisations that I recommend, that I know and trust, is the Hunter Wildlife Group. That is hunterwildlife.org.au.
Yeah.
You can also donate to the Native Animal Trust Fund. You'll have to Google that one. You've also got the Hunter Koala Preservation Society. They're all operating in the Port Stephens area and the peninsula there, which, as I said, it's a very heavy koala area. And you've got WIRES, which is the Wildlife Information Rescue and Education Services. And the website for them is wires, wires.org.au.
Come back again next Friday night.
I certainly will be here, Phil.
And how can we reach you in the meantime, Nigel?
My number is 0427
0427
533
533
083.
Okay, 083. See you next Friday night on Nightline.
Looking forward to it.
And I've just put a link to your Facebook page on our Facebook page as well. So if you go to our Facebook page, which is just 3AW Nightline, you can find Nigel's details on there.
All right,
Terrific.
we'll talk to the animals again next week.